So in our last session, we're looking at test of controls. I tried to open my CBE practice platform, but my network was acting up. So today we're going to use the kit. We just use the kit to can work on questions on test of control. We can use the kit. Okay, I think this one is more interesting. Which question is this one? Let's zoom it. So for each three methods, okay. So remember what I did mention to you last time as we were doing the controls. I said there are areas which the examiner loves the most. So on the controls, there are areas which the examiner is fond of. Like I did mention the purchasing system. I did mention the payroll system. I did mention we have the sales system. So those areas are likely going to come up with, they are likely to be questioned. We can have flows in the inventory system, flows in the payroll system, flows in the purchasing and sales system. So I want us to go in to attempt this question, but the purpose of attempting the question is just to demonstrate how you answer the question. So we're not going to maybe do all the, I'm not going to do the question as a whole, but we just do maybe if the question wants 6 controls, you can just do 2 or 3 just to demonstrate how you can respond so that you can be able to cover other things as well. So I want us to go through, if you're answering the questions, you need to first of all go through the requirements. At least that can give you a guidance of what we are supposed to do. So if you go through the requirements, it can tell you what the examiner wants you to do. So that at least as you answer or as you read the case, you know what information is important and what information is not important. So let me again zoom that. Yes, it's much better now. Okay, so that's Swift Company. Let's go through the requirements. The first requirement is for each of the 3 methods identified in the table, describe the method for documenting internal controls. So remember the methods of documenting the internal controls. So you get to your client system, you need to understand the client system, familiarize yourself with the client system. So if you're able to pick weaknesses in the client system, that can help you pick where errors and fraud could be taking place. So as you analyze the client system, we said you don't just analyze, but you need to document. You write down what you are finding out in the client's control system. So there are different ways of documenting the client's control system. We did talk about the narrative notes, the flowchart diagrams, the questionnaires. So the question is saying now, describe the system, then you give us an advantage. Do you allow me to ask you questions on this part so that at least we work together? Please, can you help me with what narrative notes are? Any volunteer to explain what narrative notes are? So the first part of the question, by the way, this one is a knowledge question. So the first part is a knowledge question. Let me just open the document we have been using. for classes. Just where is that document? Okay, this is the document we have been using. Let me share the document. Okay, so today is revision. So in our previous session, we did look at the systems. So today we're just looking at some of the questions on controls. So the question from the kit that we are looking at is called Swift Company. So the name of the question is Swift Company. Which year is this? This is, I think, 2022 to 2023 kit. The one that I've opened. And question number, let's check. I think it's 219, I remember. Question number 219. So the first question, they've given us a table. They've given us a table, and in this table, we have the narrative notes. We have the narrative notes. We have flowchart diagrams. We have questionnaires. So the question is then saying, let's now go back to the question. Describe the methods identified and give an advantage. So now over to you. Can you please help me out? I've given you time to think. What are narrative notes? What can we say about narrative notes? How can we describe narrative notes? Terence, what can you say about narrative? What about Wilma? All right, Terence, you are saying something. Yes, you can go ahead.
I say I have no idea.
Wilma?
Okay, narrative notes, those are short notes used maybe to describe the control system that the client is using.
Yes,
Those brief notes.
yes, these are short notes. So we want to understand kuti client inombonema nzira dzipi dzinopreventa fraud, dzinopreventa errors. So narrative notes tinenge tichinyora tuma short notes. These are brief notes which describes the control system of the client. Ishara kuti what happens at each process. We can say, so let's go and write that on our Word document. So on narrative notes, these are brief notes which explain, or maybe using notes to explain notes might not be ideal. We can say narrative notes, it consists of briefly written descriptions of the client's control system, This describe what happens at each stage of the client's control system. So the narrative notes, you are writing notes that are explaining the control system of the client, describing what happens at each stage. So these are brief notes that explain the client's control system, explaining what happens at each stage. Okay, what can be an advantage of narrative notes? What can be an advantage of narrative notes? You guys have already forgotten. So narrative notes, remember, yes, Wilma, you had unmuted, yes?
All right, maybe the advantage will be, since they will be briefly written, they are easy to understand, as they do not explain much of, they don't give more details, so maybe they are easy to understand.
The point is good, but the explanation is another point, a different point. So they are easy to understand by juniors since they are descriptive in nature. They are explaining. They are actually a bit more detailed as compared to the other methods. So these can be easy to understand by juniors because they explain what's happening at each stage. But the other point where you were saying they are easy to understand because they are brief. I think the explanation part, you can say they are easy to understand. Because if you are to go with the juniors, juniors want something that is a bit more explained, not just a diagram. These are easy to understand. They are easy to understand by all members of the audit team. They are easy to understand by all members. They are easily understood maybe we can say easily understood by all members of the team. By all members of the audit team, especially the junior members. Who are not well versed with the controls. Or you can just say, especially the junior members. So if we are going with the juniors, they also need to understand in this organization where we are auditing, what controls are there in place? And the juniors will easily understand if we use narrative notes than to just give them the diagrams in the case of a flowchart diagram. So a flowchart diagram is just a diagram showing us the controls present in the client's control system. So a flowchart diagram, it requires someone who has an understanding of what does this mean on the diagram. So it's less understood as compared to a flowchart diagram is less understood as compared to narrative notes. So flowcharts, what are they? Flowcharts, we can say these are diagrammatical illustrations of the internal control system. Of the client. Which shows where controls are present, which shows where in the organization are there controls. So a flowchart diagram, it's a diagram which is showing in the organization where do we have control. So it's a diagrammatical illustration that's showing us in the organization where do we have controls and which areas. So it shows us where controls are present, but in the form of just one diagram, more like a map showing us where we have controls and where we don't. Then the advantage of a flowchart diagram. Unlike notes now, a flowchart diagram doesn't have a lot of information. It's just a diagram. So you can easily view the whole organization on one diagram. So unlike narrative notes, where you have to be given a lot of notes to understand where there are controls, in a flowchart diagram, you can see the whole organization on one diagram. So this one, it means that it is easy to identify the controls present as all controls are shown on one diagram. All controls are shown on one diagram. It's more like it's a plan, yemba. Okay, Mumbao pa plan E, yemba E, how many doors do we have? We can just see everything on one diagram. But if it's narrative notes, you have to go there on the ground. You write, okay, the office has 2 doors. You go and you write, okay, the reception is how many doors you then go to. So it means there are notes that are explaining, okay, in this area, how many doors are there? But if it's just one plan, it can show you all the doors on one diagram. So it's not notes, but you're just seeing everything on one diagram. So that is the flow chart diagrams. So it's showing all the controls present on one diagram. Then we have the questionnaires. So the questionnaires, we said these ones, they contain a list of questions which are used to identify these contain a list of pre-written questions. Which are used to determine the controls present and the controls missing in the client system. So we have questions that we write so that we go and ask the client that you're going to be auditing. Do you have a guard? Do you have qualified employees? So we are asking them questions in which their answers are going to determine whether the organization has enough controls on it. Questionnaires tend to be fast. So the question is, speed up the time needed to understand the controls present and the controls missing. So in terms of being fast, the question is, they are fast. Because we have all the questions, in most cases, it's just a matter of them saying, yes, we do have, or we don't have that. So that is with, so that's the case with the questionnaires. Now let's move on. We are done with the first part of the question. The first part of the question was a knowledge question. It being a knowledge question, you could answer this the same way I have responded without looking at the case, without even knowing what was the case about. Why? Because the knowledge questions are not case specific. These ones are not always going to be relate or are not, your answers are not going to be coming from the case. Now, let's look at now the other part of the question where you need to apply the case. So let's look at the other part of the question where you need to apply the case. So we're done with the first part. Now, the second part is saying that in respect of the internal control system of Swift Company, identify and explain 7 direct controls which the auditor may place a reliance on, and describe a test of control the auditor should perform to assess if each of these direct controls is operating effectively. Okay, so the question is asking for direct controls. Direct control is another term for key control. So we are looking at the system of the client, and we want to figure out which ones are, can we say, are important controls. And remember, I told you, if you are giving us an important control, we need to know why are you saying this control is an important one. So the key control or the direct controls, we can place reliance on. These are Remember here, key control. If you're identifying a key control, you need to tell us why are you saying it's a key control. A key control is a main control given in the case that prevents errors and fault. The key control identified must be mentioned in the case. This one is now case specific. We want a key control mentioned in the case. So we need the indicator. Why is it a key control? What is it capable of preventing? So let's go to the question. Let's go and read the question and figure out which one is a key control. So the question 1.7, I want us to just pick 3 for now. The question is saying 7. So we need the key control and the test of control. The key control and the test of control. So the question did not say key control, it said direct control. So it's the same thing. Direct control, then this side you put the test of control. So the direct control and the test of control. So let's read the scenario. Let's read the introduction first. Let me give you time to go through it, then we read it together. Okay, it is 1 July 20X5. Swift Company prints books, which it sells online and supplies to retailers across the country. The company's year end is 30 September 20X5. You're an audit supervisor with Toucan and Company, preparing the draft audit programs and reviewing the internal control documentation in preparation of the interim audit. So that was an introduction. We can't say there was a key control there. That was an introduction. Now, let's go through the payroll system. So remember, what's the question? We need a direct control and a test of this control. So if a control is a direct control, we're saying this is a strong system capable of preventing errors and fraud. So let's read now and see if we have a key control. So if we come across any direct control, we're going to stop there, then I discuss about it. Swift Company employs factory staff who are required to work a standard shift of 8 hours per day. They are required to work 8 hours per day. No staff members are required to work overtime, okay? All staff members are paid monthly by bank transfer. The company has a human resource HR department, which is responsible for setting up new joiners, and a payroll department, which processes wages and salaries. I see a key control there. What is the key control? Hello, unmute and talk to me. What's the key control?
Maybe segregation of duties.
Yes, that's the key control. We have segregation of duties. So you can put a heading. You can put a heading to your answer to say, on the direct control, segregation the company has an HR department responsible for setting up new employees. And payroll department for issuing payments. So we have an HR department responsible for setting up new employees, payroll department for issuing payment. Atsati tataura the impact. So now we need to know, okay, you have told us the difference in these departments. Now, having segregation of sorry, network can you see my screen? Hello.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So having remember, if we are saying this is a key control, we need to know why are you saying it's a key control. This is the part we are now answering. Having segregation of duties between these departments between these departments reduces the risk of ghost employees. Of ghost employees being set up. Reduces the risk of ghost employees being set up and getting paid. So ghost employees, these are people that are not existing within the business, but they are being paid. So having segregation of duty, this reduces the risk of ghost employees existing and getting paid. But how do you test now that this is what is taking place? That's where you remember the AEIOU. Ask yourself, can I compare anything? Can I inquire? Can I inspect anything? Can I observe? Can I recalculate something? So in most cases for controls,